What is going on, everybody? What day is it today? Wednesday. February 15th. I'm here at Ben Shoop. It's your host, AJ Spolsky, co-host Ben Shoop. Today, we're just going to give a summary of the Bills this offseason. News that just came in. The Bills have hired wide receiver coach Adam Henry, who's worked with OBJ at LSU and with the Giants and, with the Browns as well. So he's worked for 3 teams with OBJ. Obviously, the OBJ rumors were swirling last year. So, let's get ready for that to ramp up again. Ben, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, man. I mean, it's season's officially over for the NFL overall. Thought it was a great Super Bowl. Obviously, the ending a little bit. Everybody's got their opinion on it. I think it was the right call. I'll say that. But again, do you make that call if you're not calling all the game? That I'll leave up to everybody else. But still, great. It was a great game. Great performance at halftime. Great everything. It was just good weekend to finish it off. And yeah, excited to get into the off season, even though we've both kind of been already looking at it for a couple weeks and probably even longer than that. But yeah, excited to talk some Bills, what they should do this off season, what we think what is best for them. I mean, obviously there's a lot of questions to be answered, way more than last year. But just excited to talk some football again.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bills had a disappointing end to their season. Obviously they lost the divisional round to the Bengals, 27-10. You want to just talk about that game, your thoughts on it, and then just your overall thoughts on the season as a whole, and just kind of bring some perspective from your end on what this Bills team accomplished this year, what they didn't, what they could have done better, and obviously the ending and how it ended in Orchard Park.
Yeah, I mean, this picture right here even is pretty much how that game went, right? It was tough to watch. If you like the Bills at all, if you wanted the Bills to win that game in any way, shape, or form. But it was a tough game. And I think obviously the way you lose dictates how people are going to feel going into the offseason. And you saw that right away, and you're still seeing it right now to this day. Obviously, it didn't go well, so people are saying a lot of crazy things, a lot of different things that it's kind of just a cluster right now of a bunch of different opinions of what people think we should do. But I mean, I think overall the season, it was a good season, right? I mean, we won the division again. We still won a playoff game, and then we just happened to lose to Cincinnati, which Cincinnati is a very good team. People are acting like we lost to like the Patriots in the playoffs. Like, we didn't lose to a team that shouldn't have been there. We lost to a team that was a very good team. I mean, they made the Super Bowl last year, right? So I think that game though was just a combination of they were exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. And that's the thing. Like, every team gets physically and mentally exhausted throughout the season. But I think that's one thing the Bills had that a lot of other teams didn't, at least to the extent that the Bills did, was the emotional aspect, right? You had the whole situation with Kim Pagula, Dawson Knox's brother passed away, and then you have the Damar Hamlin incident, and it seemed like a lot of it just was piling on with this. Then you had the snowstorms, the 2 snowstorms here. I mean, one game got moved, right? So I think it was just a combination of everything. A lot of players kind of said that after the game too. Like, they couldn't find the energy. And I heard, I'm forgetting who I heard said it, but I think it was actually Steve Tasker on one of his shows. He said right after the game, he said, look, usually you'll need one play to really get people going. That game seemed like you needed 3 to 4 to get the team going, right? Like, it just seemed like it wasn't boom, one big play, team's getting going, right? You could tell they were exhausted. But I mean, it's how it goes, right? I mean, if you're fighting all year, if you're really playing all year, you're gonna get exhausted. And obviously, that's not the best excuse to lose, I guess, but it's a valid reason, and it's a valid point in my opinion, because obviously we're not in that locker room. But with the amount of players that said that it was physical, mental, and emotionally exhausted, I think that's just the main reason. And maybe even if we weren't, we still would have lost that game. But we're still a very good football team.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think all of the outside distractions that this team dealt with, that you all mentioned, definitely took a toll on this team. And I think honest to God, the Bengals defensive coordinator had a really good game plan. Like, he did a really good job taking away what the Bills like to do. He was sending pressure from all over the place, all over the field, and the Bills' offensive line had no idea how to, pick up those free rushers. And it was just a bad game in total. They were down 14-0. They had a chance to double up. They had the ball, and they got 3 points out of it. So they went from 14 points, the possibility of getting yourself back in that game and taking the lead, to getting 3 points. And they were on the plus side of the field in both those drives. They just stalled out. So that was tough to see, tough to watch, for a team that had such high hopes coming into the postseason. And Diggs mentioned on an interview on the Rich Eisen show that after week 9, something changed. By advanced metrics, the Bills' offensive DVOA actually was better. They were a better second half team in terms of the advanced metrics and situations. And they were really good on offense when the game was close as well. So that's another thing that, people can say they were front runners, but this year they really did well in key moments on the offensive side of the ball. And in the last week of the season, they just got out schemed, out coached, outplayed. The players on the field weren't playing that great. So that really stunk to see that the Bills had to end that way. And then in terms of the total season, I mean, the advanced metrics say the offense got better as the year went on. But from the eye test and from like commentary or perspective, I don't know how much that Bills offense got better. You look at, I think the Dolphins game was a really good offensive game. They went up 17-0, were able to battle back and win, and the defense laid an egg and let up 31 points. But Allen was turning the ball over a lot. They had a lot of follow concepts, which is when, a guy does the same route but a few steps behind him and tries to get to the same spot. So the spacing was a little weird. I don't know if Josh was comfortable with that. So they just, overall, the season was fun. But there was never a moment where I was like, I would say my hopes were higher after the first 5 weeks than they were the rest of the way. Like, after the first 5 weeks, I was like, wow, this team, they're scoring on offense. They're putting up points. Their defense is playing lights out. And then something just changed after Kansas City. Kind of just like last year. They beat Kansas City in the regular season and then went on like a little 3-5 funk. This year they beat Kansas City, and they still managed to win those games. They didn't slide down the hill like they did last year, but they still started turning the ball over, being careless. Defense, the injuries were just tremendous in terms of how key they were to this defense. And Poyer playing with, a dislocated elbow and a knee injury, that did not help. So all of those things just added up. They did the best they could. They always do. They're professional athletes. They want to win. They want to be the best they can be. And I think, like you said, when it came down to it, their mental, the amount of mental burden they went through this year was just too much for them to handle.
Yeah, I think also when you're talking about weeks 1 through 5, like that, looking at the fans and how they're reacting, that I think played a big part in why everybody's, a little upset and saying, there's obviously people that want to really change a lot and really get rid of some guys and, flip the script, get new guys in here. And I think part of that reasoning is because of weeks 1 through 5, because of how great they went. Like, we blew the Rams out, right? We blew the Titans out. We beat Kansas City. And obviously the one loss we had was that crazy Miami game. So everybody just thought, okay, it's just a crazy Miami game, like with the heat and everything. So I think that also put it in people's minds of like, okay, this team should go all the way, right? This team should easily go all the way. We're whooping every team right now, except for one crazy game in Miami. So I think that changed a lot of people's minds. And now seeing how it ended, people obviously are a little upset, which you can be upset. I am not saying don't be upset, but it's just, in reality, we are still one of the better organizations in the past 4 or 5 years. We still have, we've won a playoff game each of the past 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. And it's what other teams are doing that, right? Kansas City, San Francisco, maybe, although I don't even think San Francisco did they make the playoffs last year?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, I think they did. Yeah, I don't know, but I'd have to look at that again. But yeah, like there's not many teams that are doing what we're currently doing, before the season, people said this roster was one of the best ever in Bills history. And now it's all of a sudden flipped, right? It's just completely flipped. And I think it's not even the players really that we're not bringing in the right players. I think it's just, little things that we need to improve upon as an organization. And I think, again, like we were saying, it's just at the end of the day, most of it was just the mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion that this team had. But that's why, again, I'm not really on the board of blowing everything up, get rid of a lot of people, bring in a bunch of new guys. Obviously, we're in a little bit of a cap situation, but I think we'll be fine. And a lot of teams are in the same situation as us. And I think that's what, as a fan base, they need to, like Bills fans need to realize, is we're in a same situation as a lot of other teams. You've heard Bengals might have to cut guys like Joe Mixon, might have to trade a guy like T. Higgins to make cap. Just teams are trying to make this work, and we're not the only team. So I think that's another thing that fans have to realize, is we're in the same spot as a lot of other teams.
Yeah, now let's shift the focus. We're going to look at free agents just internally with the Bills, what they should do. I think we have like 6 or 7 guys that Ben's going to scroll through here. So, Ben, you can pull up the first one. Jordan Poyer, you can go ahead and talk about it.
Obviously, probably the biggest free agent we have, arguable with Tremaine Edmonds, but he's been here for what, 5-6 years now at this point, maybe a little longer than that. But for me, he's been one of my favorite players. He has been my favorite Bill, at least, but one of my favorite players in the league ever since he joined. Obviously, he's got a great story. He's got a great, just background with how he came up and his struggles and everything. And he's a great player too. So it's tough to look at him and say, just let him walk. Don't even, why bother? He's going to be asking for a decent amount of money. He's turning 32. Obviously, he's going to be a little older. So it's a big question. Even though I do really love Poyer, I think it might be time to maybe try to move on if you can't reach a good number on a contract, which I think he wants to kind of, get his money, get his worth. So I'm leaning to the side of, unless he really comes up and says, I'll take a way smaller deal than I should, I think it's time to move on. And I think he's kind of hinted at that for a while. Him and his wife kind of have, made it known that they're probably not going to be back. I think a lot of people kind of are guessing he's not going to be back. And it's tough, right? It's tough. I think you'd agree. It's a tough thing to see a guy, especially a guy that's been here and been such a focal point of our defense. But I'm leaning towards the side of letting him walk just because of our cap situation. But obviously we'll see what happens. But what do you think? You're muted, by the way. Here.
I think Jordan Poyer is kind of a guy that can be a factor still at his age, but I just don't think the Bills should consider re-signing him. I got his stats up according to PFF from the last 2 years. He had a better season in 2021 by far. Anthony Prohaska from the film room said it was probably one of the best seasons from a safety in a long, long time. He still managed 4 interceptions this season compared to 5 last year, 3 pass breakups compared to 5 pass breakups last year. So he was still putting up good numbers there. 52 tackles, a little bit lower than last year. Run stops, 14, so a little bit lower than last year. So everything's a little bit down from last year. He was in the box a little less, but he also played less games, 229 snaps from the slot or in the box. So that's something to look at. I just think he is really important, a really good leader. But when you have things need to change, and I want to see new people in this scheme to see what they can do, to see what they can make out of them. I think it's very important for the progression of this team moving forward, because you're not going to be able to retain guys now with the cap situation. You're not going to be able to sign all the guys you want. So Poyer is a guy with his age, his injuries this year, and just his overall, play in the fact that he switched his agent. I think that's a telling sign that he's going to want to chase his money, and I want him to get his money. I'll root wherever Poyer goes. I'll definitely, even if it's the Dallas Cowboys, if he ends up there, I
think the only team I won't root for is if he goes to Miami. Which
if he goes in division, that'd be a little tough. But if he goes out to the NFC, I think it's go ahead and get your money, like take it. I think the Bills, in a way, they know it's best that they move on. I think it's best that they believe Jordan Poyer deserves money. Like, he deserves a contract somewhere else, gets paid for what he's done here. He'll always be remembered as one of the greatest Bills, but I would let him walk and try and fill in. I mean, who knows the DeMar Hamlin thing? I've heard reports he's going to try and play again. You still have Jaquan Johnson, who wasn't that great. Christian Benford's a guy that they've talked about moving to safety, which I could see happening if he can really learn throughout training camp in this offseason to play that position. So they have options, and there's the draft and low-end free agent guys that are available. So they have options to replace Jordan Poyer. It's not, if you lose Jordan Poyer, there's going to be a huge hole. I think it can be replaced. It may not be as talented, but it can be replaced. So I'd let Poyer walk.
Yeah, and I'm honestly, we'll get into this in weeks from now and everything, but I do like this. I do like this safety class in the draft, but obviously we'll see what happens with Poyer. I think the general consensus is that he's going to be gone, which again is sad, but it's a business, right? It's a business. Next guy we got up is Roger Saffold, right? We got him last year. We signed him to a nice little 1-year deal. Came over from Tennessee, was kind of disappointing to a lot of people. I mean, I think a lot of people had high hopes for him, especially to be maybe a guy that can be that left guard for us, even if at the end of the year we would re-sign him this year. But he was pretty bad, in my opinion. I mean, it didn't really seem like he ever found that consistency that, people hoped for. And from what I'm seeing from his market value, it's a little higher than I'd expect. So I'm also, again, leaning to the side of just let him walk. I've been saying it pretty much ever since the season ended, honestly, before the season, is I want to draft or sign somebody that we know is going, like, maybe, obviously you don't know if anybody coming out of the draft is going to be a stud. But I would love to draft a guy in the first round, maybe in the first and second round, to say, all right, we have him at least for the next 4 or 5 years. And he could potentially be that guy that we have for the next 10 years, just one stud O-lineman, because as much as I love Deion Dawkins, he's not in that stud O-line range for me. And Morse, I guess, is the closest we have to a stud O-lineman. But again, he's had 6 concussions in his NFL career alone. He's getting older. He's already on a lot of money, so he's not going to be here for much longer. So I'd love to really get a offensive lineman in the draft or free agency, and just try to upgrade over Roger Saffold, because I don't think he's going to be worth the money. If he wants to come back on a small little cheap deal, I'm fine with that, but I'm not handing him that much money to come back and do what he did this year.
Yeah, I'm going to go talk with Roger Saffold just for the fact that I think they can get him on a cheaper deal. Obviously, he wasn't great, and you have to remember he came over from Tennessee. So I'm just going to bring up a cool stat from PFF. Last year, he was asked to run block 412 times, pass block 494 times. That was in Tennessee. This year, he was asked to run block 399 times, pass block 796. So about a little over a 300 pass block increase from last year to this year. That's asking a lot more from him than what he was doing in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. His passing grades were down. Offensive pass blocking, run blocking were all down from last year. He allowed 35 hurries, 42 pressures, just very bad, very bad. He allowed 18 hurries in 2021 with Tennessee, so almost double the amount of hurries in 2022. Lined up all his snaps at left guard, had 10 penalties this season. A lot of 42 pressures as well. So just a rough season for Saffold. He was getting, I think Anthony Prohaska on the film room last night said when he allowed a pressure, it was within like 2 seconds. Like by the time, like when he got beat bad. And it wasn't like he was getting beat after 3 or 4 seconds. He was getting beat quick. And that didn't allow Allen to have time to throw. So that's another thing that Saffold didn't do a good job of. But you have to remember, he would be a great guy to have as a depth piece if you can get him back on a cheap deal, if he wants to continue to play here. If you have him as your 7th, 8th O-lineman that can come in and give some competition, teach the younger guy that they draft or take a swing at in free agency on a lower end deal, you can use that So I don't think it's technically walk. I want to talk with Saffold if I were the Bills front office, see what he wants to do, and he can be a guy because you have to remember too. There's 32 teams in this league, five offensive linemen on each one. There's not many teams that have 5 starting caliber offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And that's the thing especially with our cap situation. When you have an elite quarterback, you're going to have to take hits at other positions, other position groups. So that's what has happened. And Saffold, get him back on a cheap deal. I'll talk and think about it. But if he wants to be a starter, if he wants to return to this team as a starter, and you're going to guarantee him that, I'd let him walk.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we kind of both. I don't know. He's a weird one because it's like, okay, let him walk if he's asking for a decent amount or if he wants to be a starter, but we'll at least consider it. But yeah, Roger Saffold, we'll see what happens with him. Next up is kind of a smaller one. I mean, it's Case Keenum, backup quarterback. We obviously traded, I believe it was a 7th round pick for him. So he was our backup this year. He didn't obviously play too much, but it's worth a conversation, right? Because backup quarterbacks you're seeing are becoming more and more valuable in the NFL because there's a lot of injuries to quarterbacks nowadays. And Allen's obviously a running quarterback. He does take hits, but he is bigger, so he can take some more hits. I'll let you start this one. What do you think about Case Keenum? Walk or talk? What do you think?
Yeah, I would just let him walk. I think you can fill in a free agent quarterback this offseason or draft one late and see it. I mean, if you can trust him to be that backup. The scary thing is about it is that Allen, he's very physical. So it's like it's hard for me to trust that he's going to be available every single game to play. But there's guys in free agency like Andy Dalton, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew from Philly. He's another guy that they could bring in. So there's some names in free agency that they could just bring in to replace Keenum. I don't really have an opinion on Walker talk. If he wants to come back, fine. If he wants to leave, fine. I think they can replace him, and it's a replaceable position. But I'll say this, do not leave it unaddressed because they need a sufficient backup due to the fact that Allen is a guy that is physical, has a better chance of getting hurt, and you want to have an offense still that can win you games against lesser opponents if Allen were to go down for a few weeks. So it has to be addressed. I just don't know if Keenum's the guy, so I really don't have an opinion on it.
Yeah, I'm going to say walk. I mean, even if he does want to really come back, he didn't impress me really when he was even in obviously preseason a little bit in the regular season. I believe I don't even know what the number of snaps he played, but I mean, he's older. He's been in the league for a little bit, which is a positive and a negative, right? It's a positive that he knows he's been in the league. He knows how to operate in an NFL organization, but at what age will his play really start to decline, right? I think we've already kind of seen it decline a little bit, but now when does it really start to unravel? And then what if he's our only option? Allen gets hurt, then we're stuck with Keenum, and can barely really do anything. Obviously, he has the history with Diggs, with one of the more memorable catches in NFL history. But again, that was how many years ago at this point? I mean, it was a decent amount of time ago. He's not the same guy. I'm just saying let walk. Either draft someone or, like you said, go get somebody in free agency. And one guy that I would absolutely love is the guy you mentioned, Gardner Minshew. But I think he could probably get a job to maybe compete at a starting position somewhere. But I would somebody like him or even Dalton. I mean, obviously fans would probably love that because he's he was the reason we made the playoffs for the first time in 17 years. So we'll see. I say walk though. I think you can either get equivalent or better than him. So next up, we got Jordan Phillips. Had battled some injuries this year, right? I mean, but he's a fan favorite. He obviously loves being in Buffalo. He loves it here. I think for me, I'm just going to keep it short and simple, and I'll pass it to you. You got to talk to him. I think he would want to be here. I think he would take, again, less money. I think he could be a impactful player again this year if he can stay healthy. Let him rehab. I believe it was his shoulder, correct? It was just let him rehab it. Let him get back to 100%. Bring him in again. He can run with Settle, run with Jones, run with all those guys, and maybe if you draft another one and add obviously and draft another one, you got the rotation there. So I think Phillips, bring him back. I love him as a person. I love him as a player. Just needs to stay healthy. So that's pretty simple for me.
Yeah, I would do the same thing. I would talk Jordan Phillips. I got some advanced metrics from SIS here. His average tackle depth against the run was 1.2 yards, which is really good. I mean, that means he's doing a good job. It's the best on the team besides Prince Amelie, but he only had 26 snaps, so it's not really comparable. So Jordan Phillips, 1.2 average tackle depth, 1.8 tackles a game. Some of his advanced metrics too. Points above average is looking at negative 0.51, which isn't awful, but Oliver actually led the team with that at 4.67. And then points saved on the year, Jordan Phillips was 3, so also not that bad. So he's doing all right, not great, but he's a guy that's been here, loves to be here, and he's played his position really well. He's a big body. When healthy, he can get to the quarterback on occasion. He's a very good guy in the locker room in terms of energy, hype. He can get the crowd going. So he's a guy that I would talk to, but I think that, again, I said this earlier in the show. You need new people. He's been here before. It was a second stint with the team. It didn't work out. He didn't really produce in terms of sacks or big, plays. And I know that's not really his job, but he didn't do enough in my eyes to be like, yes, let's re-sign this guy. So I would let him walk personally, just because of the fact that he's been here. You can keep running it back, but there needs to be some changes made, and even if that's giving Tim Settle some more run. DeCon Jones has been really good. You can add a guy in the later rounds, D tackle to develop. Ed Oliver could be a possible trade candidate. So that's another thing. If you trade out Oliver, maybe you want to think about bringing Phillips back. But I would let him walk right now in terms of the status of the roster, who's on it, who's going to be here next year. He's a guy he's been here. He's been good, but he hasn't done anything to show me that he can put this team in a better position to win.
Yeah. I mean, he's gonna be a tough one. I think it's gonna come down to, again, also how much he wants to. Because I think, again, if he's gonna want some pretty decent payday, even decent, I think it's gonna be tough to bring him back. But we'll see. Jordan Phillips, obviously fan favorite. We'll see what happens with him. All right, next guy up is another big one, right? It's Tremaine Edmonds, right? He's been here for about 5 years now, and he was just 18th overall or 16th overall pick in the 2017 draft with Allen, and he's really took a step this year. I think. I mean, everybody said, it's his contract year. He needs to show us something, and I think he played well. But it's a tough, very tough decision, I think, to make. I think it's obviously, if you're going to choose him or Poyer, I think you got to go Edmonds, younger. He's again going to be another leader that for years to come. But again, how much money is he going to ask for? And 2, do we want to invest that much into our linebacking corps? Right? We would, I think, automatically probably be the highest linebacking corps paid, the highest paid linebacking corps in the league. If you re-sign him, I would look at it. I would talk to him. I would try really hard to get him back on a decent deal. Probably like a 4-ish year deal. I think 5 is when you're really just it depends also on how much you guarantee him. If you guarantee him a lot of money, that will change it too. But I think you try to get him back for at least 4 years. Him and Milano, they fly around the field. Obviously, I think Milano is very underpaid for what he does. But if you can get Edmonds on a similar deal or a little more, I think easily you got to do that. But I think, you got to at least talk to him. No way you just let him walk. It's a little different than Poyer because he is only 24 and he could be, if you sign him for 5 years, still he's 30, right? So I think it's an easy talk.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I think this is the highest of my list on offseason priorities for the Bills. I think Tremaine is a guy that, if you just look at the statistics, he just had such a better season than last year. His grades on PFF are all better. I mean, I don't really take into account grades, but in the general consensus, when you're looking at if a player has improved from one year to the next, grading wise for PFF, it does a good job of that. He had 2 sacks, 2 hits, 6 hurries, 91 tackles, 42 run stops, which is a really good stat. So he just played a really good, had a really good season. He had 12.18 points saved in total on the year. Point saved per play was at 0.03, which was third highest on the team, but behind AJ Klein, who didn't get that much run. So it was second highest on the team behind Matt Milano. Matt Milano just played unreal. He had 28.66 points saved. So obviously Milano may be the better, player at his position, but they're both elite at their position, and Milano's one of the best. And I think Edmonds is one of the best. I would love to see them try and bring him back. He's looking at around 15, 16 million. I know there's teams that are out there that have the cap space that are willing to pay him an extra couple million, and that's an issue. If the Giants are a team that have a lot of cap space, they can pay him. There's teams out there that can afford him at a higher rate because of their cap space that the Bills don't have. So the question will come down to, does Tremaine Edmonds want to stay here for a little less money, but continue to build what he's built and be the leader of this defense, or does he want to go elsewhere? Because if he goes elsewhere, man, and if they use him in a way where he's on the edge or getting to the quarterback, I could see him have a crazy year. And the Bills fans, I think, would be upset about it. So that's the biggest offseason priority for me. He did really good in coverage this year as well. He was targeted 35 times, which is, a pretty good rate to look at the overall season, and a lot of 60% completion percentage. So not a bad year for him, passing wise either, pass defense wise. So he's a guy that I think they have to try and re-sign first. That's the biggest priority on this defense. If you lose him, there's guys who can fill in. I have a chart up on my Twitter that has some names. Devin Bush is a guy. The kid from Detroit who had a really good year, but he's another guy. The kid from Detroit's looking at like 10.7 mil. That's a guy that you're going to have to pay money for. So would you, 5-6 more million to keep Tremaine? I would. It's up to the Bills. I think it should be a backloaded deal like Von Miller. You can make it a backloaded deal, but the intentions with Edmonds is when he's in the last years of that deal, he's playing his best football and reaching his peak. So it won't be like Von Miller, where at the end of his deal, you're probably going to try and save some money, maybe get rid of him if he's not performing like he was when he was 33, and he'll be 38, 39 years old. Tremaine Edmonds with a 5-6 year deal will be 30, 31, and he'll be like his last couple of great years of being elite will be in the Bills uniform, making the money he deserves. So I think keeping Edmonds is the number one offseason priority.
Yeah, I think it's just going to come down to money. And I think he could be a situation where guaranteed money comes into effect, where he might get a lot of guaranteed money because he might say, hey, look, I'm getting more money overall from a team like the Giants, but if you can guarantee more, then I'll be here. So yeah, I think we're on the same. We're both kind of in agreement there that Tremaine, try anything you can. The only way you don't bring him back is if he's asking for money that we don't have, right? So next up, though, we got 2 more that we're going to talk in depth about, and then I'm going to ask you 3 more just quick that we just go walk or talk, right? So next up is a guy who didn't really play a lot. Actually, did he play? I don't even know if he played at all in the beginning. Maybe in the beginning of the season he played 1 or 2 games, and my memory's blanking. But Jamison Crowder, right? He was a guy that a lot of people wanted to see. He's a guy a lot of people were very hyped to see him. Obviously had the injury that really, really just took him out of the lineup, right? He was out for almost the whole season. And he came over on a cheap deal. Maybe you can get him back cheap again. I would say he's a talk because I think he has the skill set that we're looking for, and I think he could probably play over McKenzie easily. I think if you can get him back on another cheap deal, do it in a heartbeat. And obviously, because people just want to see receivers on this team, they want to see different receivers. But I think he would be another great addition that maybe we can see a full season out of him this time, or at least more than what we saw. So I'm saying talk. You got to, I think, at least entertain it. If he's asking for a lot, obviously no. But if you can get him back cheap again, I'm all for it. I think Jamison Crowder could be a great addition to this offense during a full season, playoffs, everything like that. So I think Jamison Crowder, you got to try.
Yeah, I'll just play devil's advocate here. I'll say walk. He's a guy that's getting older. He got hurt this year, was out the whole season. There was all these excuses, like he had never had a good quarterback to play with. He never had a good quarterback to play with. I mean, we've never seen him play with, I guess, a good quarterback. But still, they have Isaiah McKenzie under contract for one more year. He's a guy that they could move on from. I think they could get, a fifth, sixth round pick for McKenzie if they wanted to. I think offenses would like to utilize him in their offense. So Crowder's a guy for me. He has talent. He is a typical slot receiver. He's a guy that you want to be in the slot, but I want to get younger. I don't want to keep, I want to get in the draft. I want to get a guy in the draft. There's a lot of talented guys. Josh Downs from North Carolina, Eric Turner and I were on the film room, and I mean, dude, the kid is just special. Can read where the players are, can get around them, does really good at avoiding contact, has really good tempo, can change speed quickly, get open. So there's just guys like that in the draft. Jalen Hyatt's another guy from Tennessee. He's not as much of a polished route runner because of what he was asked to do at Tennessee, but he still has that deep threat breakaway, low 4.3 speed and can, change a game at any moment. And then, there's a plethora of guys that I think the Bills could add in the draft that can be, guys that fill right in and play meaningful snaps for the Bills this year. I also think in free agency, you look at Greg Dortch, Paris Campbell. Greg Dortch is probably going to be tougher to get because the Cardinals he's an RFA, so the Cardinals are probably going to match any offer that Dortch is given due to the fact that I think they really like Dortch and they have the money to do it. So if you want to keep your slot receiver, keep trying to build around Kyler. Kyler liked him when Rondale Moore wasn't on that field. So Dortch is a guy that you could go after. Paris Campbell from the Colts, he had over 500 slot snaps. So he's a guy that's got when healthy, a lot of experience in the slot. So I would let Crowder and even Beasley walk. If Beasley wanted to come back for a cheap deal to be a mentor and kind of just teach the slot, receiver to play the position. But I mean, he's a professional athlete. He's going to want to be on the field. So it's hard for me. So I'd let Crowder walk.
Yeah. Yeah. And Beasley was one that I was actually going to ask you about. I would say walk as well. I mean, he's 34, about to be 35. You can tell, I mean, he's lost a lot of steps, right? But if he wants to come back as like a coach kind of player, I'm thinking of Miami Heat guy that's Udonis Haslem, where he's technically a player, but he's really just there to coach.
Davis Webb.
Yeah, exactly. Why not? I'll bring him back that way. But when it comes to playing, I'm gonna say no with Beasley. But the last person that we'll talk a little bit in depth with is the punter, actually, Sam Martin. Right? Obviously, we had a little bit of a weird situation with drafting one, and then the whole situation happened with him, and now we brought in Sam Martin. I thought he was good, but it's tough for me to say walk or talk on him just because of the fact that at the end of the day, it's a punter, and it shouldn't be that big of an issue for us. So if he wants to come back on a cheap deal, by all means, bring him back. But if he's asking for anything more than a couple million, maybe 1 or 2 million, go get somebody else. I mean, spend the money elsewhere. We don't even punt that much anyways to begin with. So I'm going to say leaning towards walk.
Yeah, I would also lean towards walk. He, like you said, he's a punter. I don't really have much to say about him, but I'm going to bring up his punting stats from this series, see what he did. His longest punt was 67 yards. He averaged 47.5 yards per attempt, which is actually his career best in the NFL, behind his 2016 season in Detroit, where he had half a yard more. So that's not bad. Only allowed on returns. 20 returns for 223 yards. So the coverage got down there. He had averaged 4.22 yards of hang time, which is really good too. Better than his last 2 seasons. So he wasn't bad. He wasn't great, but he's a guy that you can replace. He's a punter, like you said. And I haven't looked at punter free agents yet or anything, but I'm sure there's guys that can fill Sam Martin's role.
Yeah. Before we end it, I'm just going to ask you 3 more players. We'll say we'll either say walk or talk, and you can do one quick line if you want, or just say walk or talk. But the first one is Tyler Matkovich, linebacker,
Walk.
plays special teams. I would say walk as well. David Quessenberry, that I would say at least talk as a
Yeah,
depth piece.
yeah, he could be a guy, but I think Bobby Hart is a guy that they like, and I also think Tommy Doyle is a guy that they like, and Alec Anderson from UCLA, who most people don't know of, but some people talk about him and say he could be a really good player. So I think they have so much youth there that I don't really think much of bringing back Quessenberry, but maybe they do. I would say walk just because you have a lot of young guys that are, looking to play, and you want to see what they can do on the field. So I would say walk just for that reason.
Yeah. Shaq Lawson.
He's another guy like walk.
Yeah.
Like he's been here before. He had a good season. I'm not going to say he was like terrible or anything. I think he's a good player, but I want AJ Epinesa, Boogie Basham to play snaps this year. I want to see what they can do given like an actual few plays and not just coming out and rotating so quickly. I want to see them actually, get some snaps behind Von and Russo and try to get her into a rhythm, try to get some confidence. And the more pieces you add on that D line, the less opportunities those two have. So I would let Shaq Lawson walk just based on that. If you can get him for a cheap deal, maybe, but I'm not. I want to see the young guys. I'm what's the word? Advocating for youth. This offseason. I just want new faces, new people to see what they can do in this offense and this defense moving forward.
And the last one I'm going to bring up is somebody actually probably should have put up there, but it's Devin Singletary. Obviously, big question. I think he was pretty good last year. Big running back free agents this year. Like there's a lot of them. I really like this draft class as well with running backs. So maybe you could draft one. I would say talk just for the sake of it, just because if you can get him back on a really cheap deal, if he says, hey, I want to be here, and I know that the running back market is crazy right now because there's so many guys that are getting contracts, and if he doesn't get one, sure, bring him back. But if we bring him back, I want to see James Cook as the number one. I don't want to see Devin Singletary as the number one. I want to see him as a 1B number 2 option, right? I want to see the majority going to James Cook. I liked him last year. I know he didn't have a lot of snaps and a lot of runs and whatever, but his DVOA for at least his amount of rushes was phenomenal, right? If you look on Football Outsiders, you can see it. I think that's where a lot of people get their DVOA and everything. But when he got the ball, he was good, and I liked seeing him on the field. He brought a little bit of explosiveness. When he hits the hole, he just goes. So I think James Cook would be the number one if you bring Singletary back. But don't. It's kind of more like a talk with the let him walk mentality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm totally 100% walk. I think he was, for where we drafted him and where the Bills got him at in the 3rd round, he did, have a good role, but he's just not explosive enough for me. And he's small and he's a little slower. So it's tough watching sometimes, seeing him, because he is a good player. He has the talent. He knows how to play the position. He's very good in between the tackles. He understands run concepts. But there's guys, and like you said in the draft, Eric Gray, Roshan Johnson from Texas is a guy, Sean Tucker from Syracuse. Guys at the Senior Bowl that I watched that I really like, Tajay Spears. Evan Hull had a really good week. Chase Brown didn't have a great week, but he had a lot of volume in college. He ran for over 100 yards 20 times. He played in the college level for a long time. So there's a lot of guys that you can get in the draft late that you can just fill in. I'd say another guy, Nyheim Hines, I would let him go. I said this yesterday on Twitter Spaces, and my thoughts on Nyheim Hines and that whole situation. It almost was like the Bills and their front office just did a move to do a move just to make the fans happy. Like, I don't know if they necessarily had a plan for Nyheim Hines, because it clearly looked like they didn't have a plan. And besides those 2 kickoff returns, he didn't get much opportunity on the offense. So if you're going to trade for a guy and lose a 5th-round pick for him, the fact that they didn't have really a plan, and I think it was just kind of like, oh, hey, look, we made a move. And it was a kind of like just on paper. It never showed up in the game besides one game. He was never a factor. He was never a difference maker. He was good at special teams, but you can find guys, there's a lot of guys that can fill that role that he was doing. So I would let him walk, let Singletary walk, bring in maybe a depth free agent, like a deeper free agent running back. There's a lot of free agents on the market for a cheaper price while adding a late day 3 pick. That combination with James Cook at the running back 1, I think he can play 3 downs. So yeah, I think Singletary and Hines should both be gone from the running back room.
Yeah, I know with the Hines thing, I think it's just I don't know if there was disconnect between Bean and McDermott on that, or if it was just like you said, just to make a move to make fans happy. But that did make a lot of fans mad. It made a lot of people mad that he wasn't used, right? He wasn't used besides kickoffs. I mean, and yeah, it was a confusing thing. I don't know what went on there. If there's something internally that we'll probably never know on that situation. But yeah, I mean, this running backs. You've seen it with the Super Bowl. You've probably seen the stat too. What Super Bowl running backs are paid is under $2 million easily. You don't pay running backs in this league because they're easy to replace. And you see it with Tennessee. What have they done with Derrick Henry? Not much, right? Who's one of the best running backs in the league. Obviously, there are teams that can do stuff with big-time running backs. I mean, you saw the 49ers this year with McCaffrey. He changed their offense. But again,
he's more than a running back, though.
Exactly.
Yeah, he's not a running back. He is a running back, but he can do so much.
You're going to see with the Giants this year. Are they going to pay Saquon Barkley? My guess is no. I don't see why they would, because why pay a running back $12-15 million when you can get you're not going to get a Saquon Barkley, obviously, but you can still get a very good running back for $2-3 million. That's $10 million you save right there. So yeah, running backs are tough. Like I said with Singletary, if he wants to come back on a small deal, same with Hines on a very small deal, do it. But I'm not. It's a talk with the walk mentality, right? That's what I'm saying is go ahead and talk with him, but go in thinking we're probably going to let you walk. So, I mean, a lot of questions to be answered this offseason, right? A lot of questions. We just ran through a bunch of them. We'll obviously be talking more and more about the draft, about specific prospects, about free agents coming up, there'll definitely probably be a surprise cut or two that we'll see in re-signings, but we got a lot of time left still. I mean, it's middle of February. We still got a lot of time, and about a month till free agency opens up, I believe.
3 weeks, about 3 weeks.
4 weeks, 3.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So we got time. We'll see what happens. A lot of questions to be answered, though. Any last words before we end it, AJ?
Yeah, just make sure to follow Ben at Shoop Ben on Twitter. Me at AJ Spolsky. I have a lot of stuff coming out in terms of draft stuff after free agency starts. I'm going to focus more on free agency. I'm going to keep coming out with graphics. I'm looking at backup tight ends, maybe that they wanted to address last year. It didn't work out, and they flunked with OJ Howard. I think they could upgrade that position. I think it's important to have, if you want to run 12-man personnel, to have a second tight end that can do it. I mean, Quentin Morris is great for what they asked of him, which was not a lot, but I think they could use a savvy veteran in that position. And then, I'm looking at free agent running backs, guys that they can get on the low end of the deal, not David Montgomery's and the Aaron Joneses of the world, but or Saquon's, lower end guys. And then I'll just be doing every position the rest of the way till the draft or till the free agency starts. I'm going to be looking at, games from the players, listing the top 3 gets that I want for the Bills at each position. That I think they should address, and just follow me on there. Keep your eyes on Cover One. They do stuff every day, all the time. So that's where I intern, if anyone's listening still. So Cover One, follow them as well.
Yeah, and I know what AJ knows, but I'll be slowly getting into dropping some more, not even just football stuff, but on our YouTube. If you're watching it on YouTube. Go check out our YouTube. Obviously, it's no longer just the Shoop and Aye-Aye-Ajay show. It's Shoop and AJ, where we're going to be dropping a bunch of different stuff. We're going to be dropping different things every day. Well, maybe not every day, but we're going to be starting to try to get it to every day. But we're going to be dropping a bunch of different stuff. Stay tuned for that. I mean, we want to really start talking about a lot of things, like AJ said: free agency, draft, trade market, just different types of content for you guys. But yeah, so be sure to check out our YouTube, check out our Twitters, and check out Cover One with AJ. He's doing some producing over there and everything. So, yeah. So we will see you guys next week. We'll try to give you a little bit more of a heads up on what time we're doing it. But yeah, thanks for watching. As always, go Bills, and see ya
Later.